and welcome to the Debrief. This is Carolina Journal's weekly recap. Everything happening in public policy and politics right here in North Carolina. We have everything ready for you for this week. It's actually been a big week. I'm Donna King. I'm editor-in-chief of CJ, Carolina Journal. Joining us this week, we're going to be talking a lot about 2023, some of the hits and misses, what's happening, and looking ahead a little bit to 2024. Joining us this week, we have Donald Bryson, president of the John Locke Foundation. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. You're going to tell some of those hits and misses. And of course, we have Teresa Opeka, Carolina Journal's executive branch reporter. She's been following what's going on in the new races for 2024, filing deadlines coming up. She's going to be filling us in on that. And then, of course, the Davids, as we refer to y'all, of course. David Bass, our education reporter for Carolina Journal. Going to have the latest on some really interesting data on parenting styles and what kind of yields a mentally healthy kid. And David Larson, you're going to be talking about one of the biggest stories of this year. We're going to be really focused in on what's happening there. Now, as we look to wrap up 2023, we've been talking around the office about a lot of the policy that's happened this year. It's been a big year. We've been sort of calling it the year of the parent a little bit because we've got a lot of things that parents are going to like coming out of policy, but also some tax cuts, some other things. It was a really long session. Donald, let's start with you. We've got some hits, some misses. Tell me what caught your attention this year in 2023.
Well, if I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan. I like baseball a lot. And this legislative session was just chock full of knuckleballs. We just weren't really sure what was going to happen at the end of this once the pitcher let go of the ball. But we did get some wins. If you're looking at it from a free market perspective, some good things definitely happened. Out of the state budget, no budget is ever perfect, and this one definitely wasn't perfect. But we got some income tax cuts. The income tax will be steadily going down even further. Remember, it was just back in 2013 we had a tiered tax rate. The top marginal tax rate was 7.75%, and then 7%.
That seems like eons ago.
It does, but it really wasn't in the grand scheme of things.
So where are we now?
We're on our way even closer to zero. I think we're going to work our way down to 2.5% over the next couple of years. That's a huge difference.
It is.
North Carolina, in the Tax Foundation's index for business tax climate, North Carolina was 44th in 2013, and now we are number 9 in the country, and it's quite a jump.
Huge.
In addition, in the same state budget, we have universalized the Opportunity Scholarship Program, the school voucher program. Remember, it was just 15 years ago you couldn't say voucher in polite company.
Right.
And now every K through 12 child in North Carolina will be eligible to receive a voucher,
on a sliding scale.
On a sliding scale based on income, but every family will be able to receive some amount of voucher. That's a really big deal. We've redefined what it means to have clean energy in the state. If the point of the eco left is to be carbon free, then we need to acknowledge the realities that nuclear energy is a carbon-free and dispatchable energy, and we've redefined what clean energy is in state law. Just a lot of really good things came out this year, but on the other hand,
we've got a list here, actually. I want to work through a few of them.
That's right.
This doesn't really even scratch the surface, I think, because we did have things like election law changes, right?
We did.
Ban to Zuck bucks.
We banned Zuck bucks. Private money can't go in and fund local boards of elections to boost voter turnout, say in Durham County as opposed to Avery County, as opposed to New Hanover County. In addition to that, we repealed the pistol purchase permit. And you know what? And I think this is great. Election day is actually the deadline for a mail-in ballot to come in. Who knew you could actually set a deadline of election day?
Opponents have said, look, we need this extra time because votes won't get counted if it comes in late.
I know, but they don't ever want to count my votes when I show up 3 days after the election in person, and I always found that strange if you could accept the mail-in ballot.
Sure. Okay, so it just means that information, that voter education process has to include, this is your deadline.
That's right.
Election day is your deadline, and that's something we have to really get out there, make sure every vote counts.
Right. There are deadlines for election day. There's deadlines for when you can register to vote on time. Tax day. Deadlines are just a part of reality.
Right.
But as we continue to talk about the legislative session, there were some definite misses. A lot of them related to the state budget. North Carolina was one of the holdouts on expanding Obamacare through Medicaid expansion. We're one of the last 9 states. We've now expanded with Republican supermajorities, no less, who bonded with Governor Roy Cooper and have expanded Medicaid in North Carolina. Going to add 500,000 to 600,000 people to the state Medicaid rolls. It's the largest expansion of entitlements in state history, easily. This is a larger expansion than when we actually created the Medicaid program in the state. We only had about 230,000 people that year.
And this year we're thinking we're looking at 500,000 to 600,000
people. In addition, they created basically, we'll call it a slush fund. They gave $500,000 over the next 2 years to this nonprofit called NC Innovation. The point is so that they can give grants to these startups for applied technology coming out of public universities. That sounds like a great idea, and it actually is a laudable cause for private industry, but not necessarily for taxpayers to be on the hook. The same taxpayers that have already funded the universities, they funded scholarships for for the students or the professors who invented all of this applied technology, and now we are actually funding the venture capital. Initially, that proposal out of the state Senate budget was 1.5 or 1.4 billion dollars.
1.4, isn't that? That's a pretty significant chunk of a $30 billion.
It's more than a 30th of the state budget.
That's a lot.
Right, and they whittled that number down to the measly $500 million, $500 million. It's still a lot of money, and they gave a lot of concessions that we were concerned about at the John Locke Foundation and at Carolina Journal about transparency in the process. How are you choosing all this? And will you be open for public records laws, open meetings laws, and that sort of thing? But it's still $500 million over the next 2 years, and we're definitely concerned about that. And then I don't know when Republicans stop talking about actually shrinking the size of government. They've controlled spending over the past 10 years, but on the other hand, they're still spending more money year over year. So those are some of our misses.
Yeah, of course, at the federal level, still climbing up. So
oh, absolutely. Well, nobody's talking about it at the federal
nobody's
level.
talking about it. At least we've got a little bit of control on spending. David Bass, tell me your thoughts about this, because we were just talking about universal vouchers, even Parents' Bill of Rights. This was a good year for parents in policy. What are your thoughts on that? You've been covering it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There was actually some new data out recently showing that there had been a 10% increase in private school enrollments this year compared with last year, and that was actually the largest increase since the early 1970s. So pretty historic, and with the expansion of the voucher, obviously making it universal, still based on in a tiered way on income, but it's available to all families starting next year. I think we'll see continued growth there as well.
That doesn't mean that public schools are going away. I mean, that's the part that I think I hear a lot is that we're undermining public schools. Public schools are going to be defunded. All these other things. That's not. It really is just more of for folks it's not working for. They have an option.
Right. It's about school choice, and for most people, their locally zoned public school is still the right choice for them, or the option that they choose.
Do most people stay in their public school even though that's available?
Well, now that since COVID, I think a lot of people have had their eyes opened, definitely than prior, and so that's why you're seeing the growth of some of these alternatives, not just private schools, but also obviously charters. Homeschooling has grown significantly.
Charter is a public school.
Charter is a public school. It has more options for people to have some flexibility around how the school is set up and that sort of thing. So that's why that's attractive to a lot of people. But I think right now we've got around 20-25% of students in North Carolina are in some sort of school of choice.
That is a lot.
So it's growing. So
wow, very interesting. So you also had a great story this week on parenting styles and mental health. Mental health is a big issue. We've been talking about it a lot, particularly since the shutdown of government shutdown of public schools. And mental health is something that the state budget that we were just talking about has really invested some money in helping kids and people deal with some mental health issues, providing more beds and deregulating some certificate of need when it comes to mental health. Tell me what you found in your research.
Yeah, I think everyone's concerned about mental health with Gen Z, especially, which is kind of the younger, teens, early 20s, mid 20s right now. So young people either in high school, college age, first getting out into kind of the workforce. The interesting thing is this survey was a joint survey with Gallup and the Institute for Family Studies. And what they concluded was that parents who were conservative or very conservative actually ended up having teenagers who had better mental health. And that's compared to students parents who were either moderate or liberal, especially liberal. There was this huge divergence there. The difference was based on very conservative parents were more likely to take kind of a parenting approach that combined, love and care with discipline and structure, whereas liberal parents were more likely to take a more permissive approach to parenting. So who knew that there needed to be that balance with parenting, but it actually produces teens who are more mentally healthy, and I think particularly in this environment with so many factors against the mental health of young people. That's an interesting finding.
It is. Now, if you talk about a teen in this scenario, you've got a kid who's, say, 17 or 18. They were barely teens when COVID started. So they've spent their developmental years living under masks or being banned from schools or sports going away or whatever. That's a big issue for a lot of families.
It really is. I mean, the school was all on a screen for so long.
Sure.
I mean, the social isolation that happened during the shutdowns and everything. I mean, obviously that's taken a big toll on young people's mental health. This survey that was interesting in that the role of parenting is so important. So there are obviously factors that can play in, still things people can do to help young people. So
it really means putting the rules in place, even when they're with kindness, of course. What are your thoughts, Dad?
Yeah.
Right? Your dogs are littler.
I think, the way you raise the way parents are raising their kids, obviously, very important. I think what he mentioned about screens, that's if every part of our life is on a screen. I think it's been shown that social media and video games at too high a level can have negatively affect, K-12 students. I think this coddling of the American mind. There's sort of this idea that some of the way that schools deal with problems, rather than having people face their fears or that kind of thing, if there's trigger warnings and that kind of idea that we don't want people to feel uncomfortable, and maybe that's some of the same thing with a traditional approach where somebody gives you a little bit of tough love and says, no, get out there and do that thing, or face that fear.
That's when growth happens.
When growth happens. So I think people like Jonathan Haidt and others have, I forget what coddling of the American mind, but that was the idea that a lot of colleges are also contributing to mental health issues by telling people just to stay kind of in their comfort zone.
Right. But there's also some fear. Like, I feel like parents are a little afraid because you hear horror stories, your kids are being exposed to TikTok and whatever, that you don't want to light a fire under them if they're already struggling a little bit. Do you feel like that's founded? Where do you've got kids too?
No, I do have kids. I think, you have to have a balanced approach as a parent, or I feel like I do, in that you don't want them exposed to all of the evils of the world, right?
Sure.
You have to have age-appropriate things, but at the same time, life's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Right? You're always not always going to get your way. You're going to have disappointment. You're not going to make the softball team every time.
Sure.
You're not always going to get 100 just because you showed up, right? We don't all, participation trophies don't have a ton of value.
Sure.
And so having that balanced approach of love and reality, I think, makes for better equipped adults for the world.
Of course. So, but it is interesting that politics came back into this, right?
Yeah.
So conservative, were they taking parents who were politically conservative, versus politically liberal, not necessarily conservative in how they live or liberal in how they live?
Well, and I think it was a combination of both, because the conservative parents were more likely to adopt that kind of like a little bit what Bryson here was talking about, with like the combination of a little bit of strict with the love and care. So that combination there. It was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. Teresa, I'm going to switch over a little bit to you. We're going to switch gears. We're talking about the election coming up, speaking of conservative and liberal, of course. Election filing for the 2024 elections started this week on Monday. You were there. Long lines, very busy. What's been going on?
It was. They were out the door. It was just a really busy day. Good mix of people were there that day. I saw everybody from, we had Elaine Marshall, Secretary of State. She was there. Also, Jessica Holmes, who was just appointed as auditor for the state. She was there actually filing for the office. And there were people that were also transitioning to different offices, like Wesley Harris, who's currently a state rep. He's from Mecklenburg County. He filed for treasurer that day. So yeah, it was a good mix of people. A lot of people showed up. Some first timers too. He was a Kenny Zhu. He also is running for the seat that Wiley Nickel currently has in that district. So it was a good mix of people. Getting back to treasurer, today I went to stop by because Mark Robinson was supposed to be filing for governor today. He had a press release that he would be there like 1:30. He never showed up. But our current state treasurer, Dale Falwell, did show up. He actually was early.
At 1:30.
Yeah, he was there at 1:30. He was supposed to be there for 2 o'clock, but he showed up at 1:30.
He saw the opening and he took it.
He sure did.
He took it. He was there with his wife. And he spoke to reporters, and people questioned him, you're low in the polls. What are you going to do to get your name recognition out? He said he's never really been high up in the polls before. He was elected. The poll that mattered to him was Charlotte Republican women. They took a poll a few months ago when they had like a debate going on, which he pointed out that Robinson didn't show up for. They polled people before they went in and then afterward. And Robinson polled highest before. Afterward, Falwell polled the highest. And what he said is, well, the last 20 years people have been voting against somebody. Okay. I'm going to give you someone to vote for, because I show up for my job. I show up for my meetings. He's been a very vocal against Robinson, never showing up for any meeting or anything that he's been elected to.
Yeah, of course. Now, you've been running, we've been talking a lot about Civitas polls. We've done a lot of it here, and certainly you can find them on carolinajournal.com and the John Locke website. How is Robinson and how's the governor's race polling right now? Robinson seems so far out ahead, he would be hard to catch.
He would be hard to catch, and there was an East Carolina University poll out this week that actually did the head-to-head and polled some in the primary, and Robinson is ahead in the Republican primary. That being said, we're seeing Bill Graham, the Republican out from Concord, Cabarrus County, that area. He is steadily inching up. He's spending, I think, put $5 million of his own dollars into that campaign. He's on television an awful lot. Saw him last night, as a matter of fact, on television. And so he is steadily inching up. His favorables are showing better than Andy Wells or Dale Folwell in the Civitas poll that we run here at the John Locke Foundation. Right. And so that'll be interesting. Robinson is far ahead. I'm not convinced that if a negative campaign was run against him, he couldn't be beat. Okay. But it would take a lot of work. People aren't just going to go out and run a grassroots campaign in the next 2 months and get it done. It's going to take a lot of money and time to do that.
A lot of these polls still have a lot of undecided voters too.
That's important.
So that's something to keep an eye on.
Very
interesting.
Do.
I think the ECU poll had 49% of Republicans were undecided in that race.
Oh, wow. That is a lot. That's something to keep an eye on.
Yes.
What are you watching in this filing as we get this first week of filing underway?
Yeah, what's interesting for next year is we'll have our 10 Council of State positions, which is governor, lieutenant governor, treasurer.
Sure, and they're all elected statewide individually.
Yeah, statewide races. Of those 10, next year it looks like we're going to have about 3 that are incumbents.
Oh, wow.
So we'll have Elaine Marshall, Catherine Truitt, and then Steve Troxler.
Sure.
And especially with the case of Marshall and Troxler, I mean, Marshall's been in there since 1996, I believe. Troxler, everybody, he's a mainstay.
State Fair,
everybody,
can't lose.
And so in those, they're solid, obviously. So, but then you have 7 different positions now that are basically open on the Council of State, which will be interesting to see how those primaries pan out. Obviously, the ones for lieutenant governor are going to be very interesting. Governor, obviously, as we've just been discussing, but there are a number of other for state auditor with Beth Wood's retirement. Right. A lot of interesting Council of State races that will be down ballot a little bit from obviously president, governor, but still it'll be interesting to see how those pan out next year.
And you can't discount the importance of the Council of State, really, because they sort of fly under the radar to some degree, but it's majority Republican, and now any state of emergency that Governor Cooper declares, he has to go to them to keep it going ever since COVID.
Right, the General Assembly has given them some extra power, the Council of State, in that regard, to kind of check the governor on some things. And one race I didn't mention, of course, is the Attorney General's race,
right. That's a big
which, Attorney General, AG stands for almost governor, so that whoever steps into that role, particularly if it's a Democrat, obviously that's been the tradition of electing Democrat
Cooper
Attorney Generals.
Stein,
So I think Republicans, though, feel ambitious next
Why
year
is that?
for that. Well, you've got, Dan Bishop stepping in. You've obviously got Jeff Jackson on the other side of that, on the Democrat side. And I think that race is, just from a perspective of as a reporter, that race will be very interesting to cover.
Yeah,
There's going to be a lot of fireworks with it. Mr. TikTok, Jeff
Mr.
Jackson,
TikTok, right.
even with his ad coming out initially, the boxing and everything, it's like, it's go time.
Painful.
And Dan Bishop does not pull any punches either. So.
Sure. So only 3 incumbents. That means a lot of musical chairs, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I take your word?
You
Sorry.
took my line. No, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, looking at congressional races, that's what I was thinking. Just with redistricting and also with retirements, there's a lot of people that are looking at these different districts and thinking, with congressional races, you don't need to actually live in the district, unlike with state legislative races.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that are. So breaking news, Kathy Manning just announced she's retiring. So I think
what does that mean? Tell me, fill in the
gap.
gaps.
So Kathy Manning is, her district had been 6, is in the Triad area, had been fairly safe for Democrats for a while. So she's an incumbent, long-running incumbent. And then the new districts looks like they don't favor Democrats as much. Probably be difficult actually for Democrat. So You had Mark Walker switch over from the governor's race.
Sure.
And then you had...
Who was congressman there before Kathy Manning
went
to Congress
before,
there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Bo Hines, who had run in the 13th, which is Southern Triangle area. He went out and he's going to run, so that's the musical chairs element. People see an opportunity and they run towards it. That could be an opportunity for a Republican who's not currently a congressman.
Sure.
And I think, so Kathy Manning just today, I think she saw the writing on the wall and she said, I don't want to deal with all these jokers. I'm just going to retire.
Right.
And so there's other examples. Down also Jeff Jackson, he saw a similar thing and he says, I'm gonna go for Attorney General.
Right.
And Pat Harrigan, who ran last time there, the Republican.
Okay.
It was going to be him and Speaker Tim Moore, both announced for that district.
In a
primary, but also today, big news. Pat Harrigan announced there's some rumblings that maybe they had discussions and maybe it'd be better if there was only one major Republican running there. Who knows the truth on that? But Harrigan decided to go to the 10th, I believe, where Patrick McHenry, who a lot of people saw him in the U.S. Congress taking over for a little bit as Speaker, he announced that he's not going to be running. Maybe kind of got burnt out of all that activity up there. But so Harrigan, is leaving where he's running down the Charlotte area and going a little bit north of there.
Right.
Speaker Moore going out. So there is a little bit of musical chairs. People trying to find a good opportunity to run. So a lot going on. I think maybe one last one is it may not be a flippable seat, but Chris Cooper, who's a political scientist out Western Carolina University, he said if the Democrats could flip a seat, it's the most flippable is the Chuck Edwards way out in the far west.
Okay.
So the Asheville State House representative, Caleb Rudlow, I forget his last name, something like that. But he is not going to run for State House. Instead, he's going to try to take that from Congressman Edwards, because if the Democrats were able to flip one, apparently that
would be it.
Probably not, but so yeah, a lot of it's an exciting part about the filing is that
you don't have to live there, so you can have this, right?
Exactly, and then people are making a lot of surprising announcements in this week. So
yeah, of course.
It may be tough to beat Edwards too, because I was speaking with him on Monday when he was there filing. And he was saying, what are you going to be focusing on? And he says focusing on stopping Biden. Things are being so terrible for Americans, North Carolinians, inflation, everything going up, and we all see that.
Sure.
If you go to the grocery store, you see that. They said this is going to be a pocketbook election.
Absolutely.
So he might have a tough time beating Edwards or somebody like that at this point. I mean, he could put up a good fight for it, but he's got a valid point when it comes to the Biden administration.
So the musical chairs. When does this music stop? How long can they register?
I believe it's to the 15th.
Till the 15th.
That's the deadline.
Okay, so the music stops on the 15th, and we'll see who's sitting where. I was also watching the first because Sandy Smith is back in.
Yes.
She's filing to run again against the Republicans. She came up short against Don Davis last time around. I believe he's planning to run again. So that'll be just a rematch of the same group. It's whether they can whether they can make it work again. When they redrew the maps, it looked like that was the seat that could go Republican or Democrat, but Don Davis seems to be maybe a little bit ahead in that. What are your thoughts about this?
I think that's something that Republican consultant, that area of the state, kind of northeast of here, not quite all the way to the coast, but the northeast sort of rural area of the state. Has something that Republicans have been watching for several cycles now, because it has continued to trend more and more red. And then there are a lot of just negative news that came out about Sandy Smith in the last cycle about some domestic violence allegations involving some former husbands.
That was quite exciting.
Hit one with a frying pan. Of course, she leaned into that, started showing up at rallies with a frying pan in hand.
She held a frying pan on Facebook.
And so we'll see if she's going to have frying pan bumper stickers. I don't know. I know that folks around Raleigh were concerned about candidate quality in that race. And so we'll see if somebody else files. I don't know of any other rumors or anything like that, but we'll just see if that happens.
Be very interesting. All right, we're going to be watching this closely and keeping you up to date on CarolinaJournal.com. Also, make sure you like this video, subscribe to it. We'll be bringing it back to you every single week on Thursdays. We're going to take a quick break over Christmas, and we'll be back in January. But before we do that, David Larson, what do you think was one of the biggest stories coming out of our coverage and really anybody's coverage in 2023?
Yeah, it was interesting. I being a look back episode, looking at obviously session, and then I was trying to look at a thread that may have been followed a lot, even though it was only in October that it started. We have an awful lot of stories that connected to the Israel-Hamas situation. And, that saying all politics is local, it's interesting. There's also an element to where all politics is global, and that something can happen across the world and have kind of a ripple effect that, just for a few of the stories, I mean, after that happened, you had at the legislature, they had a resolution in favor of Israel, solidarity with them. 12 Democrats walked out of that, and 4 Senate ones refused to sign a letter. Then you have, Senator Budd has been working hard. Some of the hostages taken were actually from North Carolina, so one, I believe, was just released, and they're working on another one. Then there's been protests across. So at college campuses, that's been Congressman Edwards. He had some concerns about one. UNC Asheville had one that he thought was anti-Semitic, and so that was something we covered as well. Dr. Andy Jackson, who works here, kind of weighed that in a column that even unpopular speech should be covered. But one at UNC Chapel Hill actually used the paraglider in their
When you use that
flyer.
paraglider imagery, you lost your audience. I really think so.
And that, for people not aware, that was on. That's how Hamas entered. Got over the border and into this concert where they mowed down hundreds of people. They used paragliders. So to put that on.
That imagery is violent.
Flyer.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. We actually saw Virginia Foxx talked about this on the floor of the U.S. House. And that was what we're going to actually call our tweet of the week. Usually it's something funny or something, but it was really good words from North Carolina Representative Virginia Foxx.
Mr. Speaker, anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head on our very shores. It should be extinguished entirely. Over the past few weeks, we've seen anti-Semitic demonstrations take place across the country. Turn on the television, open a newspaper, or go online, and you'll find a litany of examples. As Rabbi Moshe Hauer mentioned in his testimony before the Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Development recently, that the plague of anti-Semitism has afflicted the United States. Mr. Speaker, I agree with Rabbi Hauer's assessment, and it's incumbent upon us all to stand with the Jewish community, push back on anti-Semitism wherever and whenever it crops up, and rid our country of this scourge.
So, she says it all, right? And also Virginia Foxx did file to run again. So tell me what your thoughts are. And she's talking about anti-Semitism has no place in civil society.
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts.
So we saw with the paraglider, things like that.
Sure.
That kind of thing strikes a lot of people wrong, and I think some on the more activist side of the left say they're really speaking for the Palestinians as they're, being disproportionately hurt because Israel's military is obviously much stronger.
Sure.
And Hamas is hiding among civilian targets and all of that. So there can be a point there, but I think a lot of their language does go well beyond that. We saw that also in the Democratic Party's fight over whether or not to have a Jewish caucus.
Sure.
Where Ryan Jenkins, who is the progressive caucus chair, was saying that if they allow a Jewish caucus, then we're a Zionist group, and the Jews, he just had some things that are like, okay, that's going beyond.
I think that actually highlights the need for free speech, and it's the argument that Andy Jackson made, and it's my position on free speech, is that, one, we shouldn't confuse speech with violence. If they're actually showing it with guns and nooses, that is a different sort of thing than images of paragliders. But the great thing about free speech is it lets you know who the crazy people are, right? And that by acknowledging that Jewish people are also Democrats, suddenly they're a Zionist organization is the most bizarre argument I've ever heard. But it's good to know who the crazy people are sometimes, right?
Very interesting.
And do you think that's one that I sort of explored. Andy Jackson explored that. Also, I explored it with the limits of protesting when they ended up blocking a highway. And to what degree is that acceptable protest?
Right.
Is that beyond speech? Because I happened to get caught in that one.
Right. You're right.
I'll shut up about that eventually.
Right. You had an hour and a half sitting on the highway to write that.
I was an hour and a half just sitting there like, what is happening?
Is this speech? I don't know.
I was like, we were kind of close to the Duke Hospital, though, and there's people who aren't just annoyed like me who actually might need to get to that hospital.
Sure.
And so, it's this kind of thing that starts some interesting conversations for sure. And so even though it's happening a world away, something for the year that's like
a huge story.
A big story that had like 40 stories come out of it.
Yeah, so. Of course. David, tell me what you think. Do you think that this debate, even though it's happening on the other side of the world, will move the needle for voters here in 2024? Because we're talking about, Democratic Party and Republican Party and how they reacted.
Yeah, I definitely think it's obviously a national issue, with the presidential race, that sort of thing. I think it'll definitely matter. It is interesting, though, to David's point about there's global politics. It's kind of coming down to the local level in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So I think that it does excite people in different areas. I don't know that it's going to majorly move the needle on the politics of it. I think other things will move it a little bit more, but for sure, people are falling into their respective camps on it, getting very excited about it.
Yeah.
It also depends on what happens next year, though, with the ongoing conflict and everything. It could still be a very much front center next fall.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Absolutely.
So
a minor thing on that local level.
Okay.
The North Carolina, there's a Jewish coalition against anti-Semitism we just formed.
Okay.
They were talking to me about the fact that it is affecting local politics kind of more than one would think, and that a lot of these city council and county commission meetings are being flooded with people demanding, I think Carborough's passed one maybe, and a couple other places, a pro-Palestine, anti-genocide kind of but they'll go on for hours. Sure. They'll have just tons of demonstrators, and they are promising to vote people out if they don't back this. So it is a little surprising that it might actually impact local races.
Wow. Yeah. Very interesting. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts?
Yeah.
Oh Lord, I think we heard plenty of my thoughts. No, that's absolutely fascinating to me. One, these local resolutions. One, it lets people grandstand and talk about what their values are, but they have no real world impact, right? But instead of worrying about making sure that the city budget's balanced, and we don't have potholes in the street, and we have enough police officers on the street to keep us safe. This is the issue that we're willing to die on and vote people in and out of office. That's sort of the bizarre sort of thing to me. I think what's going on in Israel is an absolute. Well, I mean, it's a human tragedy on every side of it, right? There's no good part of this. This is not any big rah-rah, and people are screaming for ceasefire. And as far as I know, there was a ceasefire up until October 7th in Gaza and Israel, right? And Israel wasn't shooting at anybody on October 6th. But I think that in a lot of ways we are seeing the left really sort of show who they are. And that's why I'm in favor of free speech right now, because let's take all of your views to their logical conclusions. And when they're saying, racism is wrong on all counts, I agree with that. Racism is bad. And in the same breath, they'll say, from the rivers to the sea, in which they're talking about ethnic cleansing and actually being racist. And so, yes, I would like for the American people and reasonable voters in the middle to see them voice all of their opinions. Now, if it escalates to violence, that's a different thing. But let them talk.
Very interesting. All right. And we'll be listening to them. But thank you for joining us. We're going to be here every Thursday. Make sure you check with us. We'll be filling you in on everything that's happening in public policy and politics right here in North Carolina. And happy Hanukkah if you celebrate, and Merry Christmas.